Hi, I'm Jeff Bloomberg and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at MGE. This week's tip is part 2 of 3 on what to do if you see a drop in your new patient numbers. Now, if you missed last week's tip, you can find it by clicking here, and a little bit of a recap. What we did in last week's tip is we took a look at if you were getting a decent amount or a considerable number of new patients and then all of a sudden it dropped off, what to do. Now, what I promised in last week's tip that I would do in this week's and next week's tip was I would cover what to do if you haven't been getting enough new patients or if you'd just like to get more. Now, I should also mention that MGE has 2 services that specifically are targeted to getting more new patients, and I encourage you to find out more about them. One is the MGE New Patient Workshop. The other is the MGE Internet Marketing Seminar. I have links to both below in the little box beneath this video. So I'm going to start off with examining the marketing cycle that I brought up in last week's tip. So what is the marketing cycle? It starts with some form of marketing, and then it goes to, this is for new patient acquisition, it goes to reception, all right? Now, that's what determines the number of new patients that you're getting in the office. From there, return on investment is determined by case acceptance and retention, all right? So they all work together. Theoretically, someone could do really great on the marketing, get a lot of phone calls, and have a great receptionist who converts tons and tons of new patients, but then their case acceptance is terrible and their retention is terrible, and what you end up with is you end up with a wasted amount of money, or a huge wasted amount of money on marketing. You created all these people coming in the office and it didn't work out. So what I want to focus on this week is marketing and reception. Next week we're going to focus on case acceptance and retention, because that's what's going to make your marketing work from a business perspective. So let's first take a look at marketing. First thing I would bring up is whether you're doing internal marketing, Google pay-per-click, postcards, billboards, TV ads, planes flying with banners, whatever it is you're doing. To market your office, what is marketing supposed to create? If I were to ask the average dentist, the response I would get is a new patient. Not totally the case. Eventually it will. But what marketing creates is a phone call, an email, someone filling out a form on your website. It creates an inquiry. So if I'm not getting enough new patients, the first area I'm going to look into is, am I actually receiving any inquiries? Well, first off, am I doing any marketing to begin with? And then assuming I am, is that marketing creating an adequate amount of response? Now, and this is where it gets a bit funny. What's adequate and what's not adequate? What are the expectations? Well, I can give you a few metrics to sort of think with this. When you're mailing to the broad general community, I'm not talking about mailing to your patient base, what can you expect as far as a response? If you're doing a postcard mailing or a flyer, 0.5% is really good. 0.3% is probably closer to average. So if I send out 15,000 postcards and I get 75 calls, that's pretty good. If I send out 15,000 postcards and I get 50 calls, that's closer to the average. Now, if I send out 50,000 postcards and get 5 calls, there's something wrong with either my postcard, or maybe the mailing house didn't send it out, or something went wrong, the mailing list is bad, something. All right, then I would actually be tweaking what it is that I'm actually sending out. All right. What's the acquisition cost on Google pay-per-click? The average right now is $422, meaning you're going to spend $422 to get a new patient. So you get some benchmarks. There are ways to bring these costs down, which I'm going to be discussing, especially when we get into the ROI section. All right. But those are some things you can look at with regards to expectations. So marketing creates a response. Now, the other thing I would bring up as well, if you want to get more new patients or you'd like to increase your new patients, is I would ask you, who in your office is actually responsible for the new patient statistic? If I were to walk into, I don't know, most dental offices in the United States and I asked, who's in charge of answering the phone? Someone would point one or more people out. If I asked, who's in charge of ordering supplies? Someone would be pointed out. Who's in charge of the schedule? Someone would be pointed out. In other words, there are people accountable for those various functions. Well, in most offices, if I were to ask, who's responsible for new patient acquisition, I get a lot of, I think the doctor, maybe the office manager. No one is usually assigned this responsibility. So before I even worried about what marketing I was doing, I would designate who's actually responsible for getting new patients. If you have accountability, then you have somebody whose job it is to actually pull it off. Now, they might be doing another job in the office as well, but they have a job also to acquire new patients, all right? So I would do that even before I marketed. I meant to mention that earlier and I forgot. So now we've looked at marketing. So it's either getting a response or it's not. So now, assuming I am getting a response, where am I going to look at next? I'm going to take a look at reception. So let me give you a number to think with, and I've mentioned this in other videos. I know a few of us here at MGE have. The folks at Viva Concepts, which is a dental marketing company, they have great stuff, by the way, did a very thorough study on the subject of new patient conversion and reception. And by analyzing 10,000 phone calls, what they found is the average conversion rate in the United States right now is 23%. Now, what does that mean? Out of 100 new patient phone calls, 23 on average are scheduled. Let that sink in for a second. If you're the average office and you're getting 23 new patients a month, chances are 100 people called your office that month inquiring to the point where they might have been a new patient. So you can see how we've spent all this money on marketing, especially if we're doing external marketing rather. And with internal marketing, you're spending money on time, staff members working on it. And then we create all these inquiries and then we waste a bunch of them because we don't know how to convert these people. Now, conversion, there's a number of different ways of looking at it. There's a number of different things that can go wrong. It's not that your receptionist is bad. I mean, sure, I've called offices where the receptionist isn't very friendly. In a lot of the cases, they're just not trained as to what to do. Patient calls and says, how much is a crown? And what do you know about a patient calling to inquire about the cost of your crown? In most cases, that means they need more than one, because chances are they've been to a dentist who told them they needed a crown. They're not going to leave that dentist for the difference in the price of one crown. They may need 2, 3, or 4, in which case it starts to produce a financial impact. Well, how do you handle that type of a phone call? We talked about this in other videos, but what do most offices do? We don't quote prices over the phone. Click. Well, I have this person I potentially could have converted to a new patient, and I've just dead-ended that entire inquiry. There are things like that. There are things like putting people on hold excessively, or just being unprofessional on how they're handling the call. Another issue that can tank any receptionist is poor availability, meaning, hi, I'm new in town. I'm looking for a new dentist. I'd like to get my teeth cleaned. My first opening is in 3 weeks. Chances are that person is going to call somebody else at that point. So you want to make sure that you have the ability to see a new patient within 24 to 48 hours. So assuming I can get them in that quickly, then I'm increasing the chance that I'm going to acquire this person as a new patient. Now, something to keep in mind, and I'm going to talk about in my next video, is you still have had zero return on investment up to this point, all right? So if we do the basic math, I've sent out 15,000 postcards. I got 50 phone calls. I've converted 23% of those 50 phone calls, which is 11 and a half. We're going to say 12 because you're not going to get half a new patient. I've got 12 converted to actually coming into the office. I still have zero return on investment. Whatever I spent on those 15,000 postcards as an example, I've made nothing back yet for these 12 people who have arrived in the office. When we get into return on investment, we're talking about case acceptance and how long the patient stays with the practice. And I'm going to cover that in next week's video. So I think you see where we're going with this. If you're not doing any marketing at all, obviously you need to start doing something. Whatever it is that you're doing has to work. It actually has to create responses. And then when you're creating responses, your receptionist has to know how to handle these responses so as to turn them into a new patient. We cover this at the New Patient Workshop. We also have a couple of videos on it that I've put together in a little playlist here that you can check out. Those are the first two areas I would take a look at if I want to bust my new patient numbers up. The last thing I would take a look at is availability. In next week's tip, we're going to take a look at the ROI aspect of our marketing. How do we turn this into something that's actually profitable for the business? And with that, I'll leave you for this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's tip. If you'd like to see more tips like it, go ahead and click the subscribe button. If you have any questions about MGE, you can call us at 800-640-1140 or find us online at mgeonline.com. Thank you very much.